I'm going to call the Katuitt Fire District Prudential Committee meeting April 25th, 2022 to order. We'll do a roll call. Charlie Eager.
Charlie Eager, present.
Mark Lynch. You're muted.
Present.
Seth Burdick.
Present.
Ray Perone.
Present.
Fran Parks present. We're joined by the district moderator, Ken Malloy. Could we please do the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America
and to the
and to the
republic
for
for
which
which
it
it stands, one nation,
under
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ray, what time is the auditor coming?
6 o'clock. I thought he was going to sign on.
I've just admitted him.
Oh, okay.
Very good. There he is. There he is.
Good evening, Mr. Rosselli.
You're muted.
Are we good now?
Yep, yes. Good evening. Welcome to the Katuitt Fire District Prudential Committee.
How are you?
We're all well.
Is that Ray upside down?
That's Ray upside down. Technical
trick, Ray.
difficulties.
My natural state, Tony.
Hey, Ray, in the future, when you send me a Zoom, if you can put it in the email, it works better. I have so much security on my computer that I'm trying to open it from Word. It just kept crashing on me. So I had to go the long way, but
I will do that next time.
yeah, no worries. I was hoping you guys didn't think I abandoned you. I was just, I had to do it the long way.
Understood.
How's
Tony,
everyone?
I don't know if you remember Fran Parks, Chair, Prudential Commissioners Seth Burdick, Mark Lynch, and the one I didn't mention, Ken Malloy, who's the moderator, is with us this evening as well.
Have I met anyone before? I don't think I've done an exit conference.
I don't think you did. I think COVID got in the way.
Yeah, I think we might have done the other one last year, West Barnstable, but I don't think we did ended up doing Katuitt.
Yes, I think you're correct.
But Mark Lynch looks like a guy I know from Medford. Is that the same Mark Lynch?
Different guy.
Different guy, okay.
Okay, you have the floor.
Okay. So this is our second year of doing the audit, and for the most part got through it with very little problems. The first year we had some transitional things, obviously going from a new auditor, going from an old auditor to a new auditor. So there was a lot of transitional things we had to work on. The OPEB is always a problem, trying to get everything from Siegel and company and getting the correct information that they need. And the other auditors asked for different information. I wanted, more information about the bank statements and whatnot. So there was some growing pains last year that seemed to be all smoothed out this year. That's really good news. I thought it went very smoothly, and it ran pretty well. Ray and his team were ready for us. We did some of it remotely, and we did some of it down at the district. So for the most part, it went very well. I think Ray also, we had recommended on some of the capital projects, just using a consultant to help him close those down. So he ended up reaching out to Bill Frere, who has an accounting practice down on the Cape. So he helped Ray with some of those issues that come with capital projects and bond offerings, which are very, very complicated in a municipal environment. It's not, in a commercial environment, it's just debt. You get cash and you get debt. In a municipal environment, you got to do a million different things to put it into the proper buckets. So so all that's cool now. So we did the management letter, and one of the things I wanted to talk about that I thought was important was the OPEB liability and the pension. Those are two big liabilities that the district over time has to pay off. So your pension liability, which you're part of the Barnstable County retirement system. So you don't have your own pension system. You're contributing to the county, and they do all the investing and all the management of those assets for you and all the accounting for you. And then they send us the reports. So Barnstable County in the past few years has been really lagging on their funding ratio. So the state average is 65%, and Barnstable County was in the low 50s, mid 50s. So they were a little bit behind, which was a concern of mine that I believe I may have alerted to in the last management letter, that your assessments may start to go up and you should be ready for that. Well, they had a great year this year, so I'm happy to let all my Cape Cod clients know that the funding ratio actually went up to 61%. So you're right below the state average now. So I don't have a huge alert on that, as much of an alert on that as I did last year. Last year I had more of an alert that your assessments would have to go up. We kind of got back to square one. We're only a few percentage points behind the state. So so that is something that is not quite as big of an issue. But if we have a blip, for example, the market isn't doing that well right now. The Dow Jones was up today, but it was down significantly the last couple of weeks. That is going to eat into your plan assets. So it could kind of fluctuate that liability. Any questions on the pension?
Do we know of any particular reason why the Barnstable County was just so low? Is there investments or?
No,
they run it?
what happens is a lot of so here's how this works. The counties, unfortunately, are usually trend to the low side. So if you have like the city of Malden, for example, I'll use the city of Falmouth. A town of Falmouth is one of my clients. They run their own pension system. So they're able to do what they want. They're able to contribute what they want. They have a lot of latitude, a lot of flexibility. Because you belong to a county, you have to, there's, I think, 70 or 60 members in that county. Some are affluent, some are not too affluent. So the assessments are set to meet the demographics of the county and not Barnstable in particular, which is which has more money. Barnstable, you folks would have a better ratio had you been able to not invest on your own, because the investments are pretty good, but put more in terms of an assessment over the years. So that's kind of where the lag it is, that there was less assessments going in to the system. So what Barnstable did, I don't know if you've noticed the last few years, the assessment has begun to increase a little bit. And I know my other Cape Cod clients that have big pension portions to Barnstable County saw it really hurt their budget. They had to actually, figure out how to make their budget balance, because it was almost a budget breaker for some of the bigger towns in the county. For you folks, not quite as much, because you've got a smaller group. But that's kind of why the Barnstable, as well as, so if we look at, there's I think there's 8 or 9 county retirement systems, and they're all kind of at that 55-60%, just because of the nature of it. There's about 100 systems that are run directly by towns, and those always have higher ratios, just because of the autonomy of being able to run it yourself. Does that answer your question, Fran?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So secondly is the, if there's no other questions on pension, we can jump into OPEB. OPEB, let's see, we're gonna go look at your liability. So your unfunded OPEB liability is 0.4 million. So that's gone down significantly. And one of the reasons is your investment returns have been really good. And also, you actually put a lot of money into your OPEB. You have, let me see, I think it's I have it here, OPEB. $1.8 million in your OPEB fund. And that has been returning some very nice benefits. You returned $515,000 in interest on your OPEB fund. So 515 brought it up to 1.8. So the earnings on that was incredible in this particular last year. Most of it is because you're in a managed fund that's 70-30. And the equities had an incredible year last year. So that hopefully what we're seeing in the market right now, where it's gone down a little bit in the last month, hopefully that's a short-term thing and it can recover. But if it doesn't, it will eat into the 1.8 that you've got invested in the OPEB. But you're in very good shape on the OPEB. Like I said, your liability is only 2.2, but you've got 1.8 against it. So it's a very, very small liability. So so good job with the OPEB liability. That looks like you're on your way to being able to fund that completely. Any questions on that?
Nope.
Okay, super. I had one other comment, and that was with the water bills. So you had the same individual who was collecting the water bills, is also the person who sends the bills and does a lot of the accounting with the water bills. So we thought that that was a segregation issue. You definitely don't want the same person doing both. And I wanted to highlight that to you. I'm not sure if anything's happened since, but that's it's a risk. Obviously, there's a cost benefit to changing things. So you have to evaluate whether you want to go through the cost benefit of looking at that, or if you want to maintain the same situation that you have currently.
Tony, we have an article in the 23 budget to establish a lockbox system for the district.
Okay.
That should go a long way to eliminating some of that segregation.
Yeah, I think we had mentioned that last year, Ray, that a lot of communities, the lock boxes have become very inexpensive, and it's easier to pay for a lockbox than pay for another individual. So a lot of communities, districts, agencies are using that route, and it's been met with a lot of success. Number one, your money's getting in the bank a lot quicker because it's happening simultaneously. Secondly, you're getting a tape from the lockbox company and you upload that to your system. So your records are, they're automatically updated very quickly, much quicker than what's happening now. So there's a lot of really good reasons to be in a lockbox system. So thank you for mentioning that, Ray. Hopefully that goes through in your vote and you're able to do that. One other thing I wanted to mention, which when I wrote the management letter wasn't as big of an issue, is I'm expecting the interest rates to start to really go up. The bond market interest rates are going up based on what the Federal Open Market Monetary Commission is doing. They've raised rates already 1/4 point, and they're expected to raise them another 3/2 in the next 6 months. So I'm expecting the cost of borrowing to really skyrocket. And with that, what happens is your investment returns also go up. They go hand in hand. So I want you to keep an eye on your bank accounts. In the last 2 years, it hasn't been a big deal because they're all at 0.1. They're not earning any interest. But beginning probably in the next 2 or 3 months, you're going to start to see interest rates really start to move up. So I would want you folks to really start looking at your bank accounts, calling up your banks and seeing, if they're moving their interest rates up with the market. And if they're not, you may want to start calling other banks. I don't like to do a lot of switching out of banks because you got to do cards and, it kind of turns into a pain in the butt. But if you can get a much better rate in a different bank, it may be worth it. Usually the banks that you're doing business with will increase to avoid you from entering into a competitive thing. I hadn't put it in the management letter because this interest rate thing hadn't happened yet at that time. So I did want to mention it verbally to you folks.
We look at CDs, or I look at CDs about every 6 months, and so far, the rate differential has just been meaningless. But
Exactly.
we'll keep monitoring that. And,
Yeah, I don't expect it to happen probably till about July. I think that's when you're going to start to see the move up. And in the past, they've gone as high as 2.7. I think in 2018 or 19, they hit 2.7%, which is not a bad rate. So yeah, definitely keep an eye on that. Any other questions while you have me?
Not for me.
Not for me.
All right. Well, nice job, Ray. Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for your discussion. And if you're done with me, I will dismiss myself.
Thank you very much. Have a
Thank you.
good evening.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you.
meeting. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tony.
So, is there any public comment?
Not tonight. Not tonight.
I see nothing at this point.
Thank you. Okay. The minutes from the March meeting, Mark and Seth, did you get a chance to look at those?
Yes, I did.
And any concerns
fine.
about the minutes, or they're fine?
To me, they did. They look fine.
I'll accept a motion to accept the minutes,
I so move.
the March 28th, 2022 meeting.
Second, yes.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, Ray?
In my unusual
Yeah,
position,
you're up or down.
let me try and go through this and see if I can make sense for you folks. I'll start off with my with the Treasury report for March, and I'm really not going to spend a lot of time on that for two reasons. We have a long agenda. With the blood rushing to my head, standing on my head, I'll probably fade quickly. But also the results through March were really quite good. Overall revenue is above budget by about 10%, and that's led by ambulance and the water rates. Tax levies are right on budget. Looking at expenditures, they're all below budget, or they're completed on budget. Looking forward to year end, there are going to be two variances that will present themselves in the next 2 months. They're not on the books now, so you don't see them, but we will pay a second interest on the new refinancing bond, which was not in the budget. That was $30,700. Also, the budget for Freedom Hall wages kind of straight lined from the prior years, and those were COVID years, which really understated what the normal working was. So I would anticipate that we're going to be have the debt article overspent by 31,000 and the Freedom Hall wages overspent by 1,000. The way we will, I propose to you to resolve this would be a motion that the Prudential Committee would pass at the next Prudential Committee meeting to move money from the reserve fund to those articles to cover that potential deficit.
Ray, when you say reserve fund, is that the stabilization fund? What is that?
No, that's if you look on that French page, way down at the bottom, second line from the bottom, $45,000. Each year, we provide a reserve for the discretion of the Prudential Committee to cover any unanticipated expenses. In this case, those two would qualify for that treatment. And that can be voted.
And what happens if in any year the reserve is not needed? Where does that,
The deficit, in that case, you could, if the committee decided not to cover it in that fashion, I would report those deficits in the tax recap in November, and they would be added to the amount of taxes to be raised.
okay,
The second
all right,
thing,
so you'll bring bring that up at the next meeting then?
yes, I'll have a motion for the committee at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
The next thing I wanted to mention, which is a footnote down at the bottom of that first page, is that I plan to move approximately $100,000 of expense and revenue out of the general fund and account for it in the special revenue fund. And the reason I do that is they're matching revenue and expenses. We'll put them in the special revenue fund, and they will offset. The impact on the general fund is that I'll be lowering expenditures by $100,000, which presents itself as a potential addition to free cash. There's an advantage to doing that. Looking at special articles on the second page, there's really nothing of note. They're all being spent on budget. And one of them, the water department special article for security, is going to be closed, as you saw in the warrant, and transferred to two other water department articles. Just one other thing before I ask for questions, and that is, in the next few months, the participants in our insurance plan will be afforded the opportunity to participate in the Pinnacle plan provided by the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group at no cost. This is a huge benefit. To give you an example, a young couple with no health issues would pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $12,000 a year for that service. And our members and retirees will be eligible for that for free. Huge benefit.
What is the Pinnacle plan specifically?
It is if you will, a case management on steroids. They will provide, they will find you a primary care. They will provide second opinions. They will provide medical data regarding treatment that has been proposed, and evaluate that with the result sometimes that the treatment is revised. Sometimes the diagnosis is changed. So it's like having a healthcare advocate as well as case management. Any other questions on the report through March?
No.
To get back to the Pinnacle, how did this change come about, and is there a cost associated with it?
The cost is being borne by the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group. Is the group that it's a multi-employer group comprised of all the municipal entities on Cape Cod and the islands, all the fire departments, school departments, towns, etc. We pay in to them and they purchase insurance policies which our members participate in. They have in the past collected more than they needed for premiums. And for this year, we had a 1-month holiday where we didn't have to pay the healthcare group for our policies. So we saved about somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 12% on our premiums this year. The steering committee found this group, entered into discussions, and will be voting to accept it at the next steering committee meeting, which should be happening in the next week or so. Does that answer, Mark?
I think so.
Turning to budgets, I'm getting, I'm skipping, no, I'm not. You have closing the warrant. And part
Ray,
of,
Ray, before you skip over, is the fire department budget matching what was passed at the annual meeting? The end of the budget was modified at
there's
the
that
annual meeting.
$20,000, there's a $20,000 error in there, Ken, and that is accounted for. And we won't, it won't cause a problem at year end. They'll be well underspent, as you can see.
Thank you.
What Ken is referring to is there was a motion from the floor to amend a certain line item in the budget. And when we tried to do the math, we got the total right, but not the subarticle. And based on district council's opinion, we had to live with the lower amount in the category for expenses. But it should not present a problem at year end. Turning to the budget for 23, I sent in my email that I sent out, I said that there's been some changes. I pointed those out in the emails, and I can go over those again. But there's really just one decision that the committee could take at this meeting, although if I'm correct and Charlie can opine on that, they don't have to because of the way the warrant is worded. But the decision would be to borrow money this year for the ambulance and the water department service truck and put those funds in stabilization to mitigate what we would borrow next year. I didn't pay Tony to make that speech about rising interest rates, but he's absolutely correct. I anticipate right now the ban rates that if I went out to market today for the $420,000, $410,000 ban for the ambulance and the service truck, I probably pay 2%. When I go out in July, it may well be 2.5%. But I did a study and looked at the alternative of borrowing now versus borrowing next year and using next year on a long-term basis because the amount that we would borrow would be larger. And we'll save about $40,000 over the life of that 10-year longer bond by doing it. So I strongly recommend that we borrow money to pay for those two vehicles this year. If in fact the school is not transferred and we don't have a huge amount of money that we would need to borrow next year, we can always use the funds in stabilization to retire the ban that we entered into in the early part of 23. So it's kind of a no way we're going to lose proposition.
Ray, a preliminary question. My recollection, and I think this is reflected in the minutes of the last Prudential Committee, is that the fire department had put in that $350,000 number as a possibility. That is that they weren't sure that they needed that. And as I recall the conversation, they were working out a sharing agreement with Sandwich Fire Department for an ambulance, and I thought they had successfully completed that arrangement, such that they were hoping to put off the purchase of a new ambulance for a year or two. So I don't, you know, I prepared to be corrected if someone from the fire department is on the call, but I thought that the way that was left was they were going to try to push that expense off until at least next year, maybe farther than that.
Mark, my understanding, I see Rick is here. He can speak to it. So I'll defer to Rick. Rick, do you want to,
Rick, you're muted.
you're muted, unmute yourself and comment?
Yes, you are right that we are still working out an agreement with Sandwich for a spare ambulance that would give us backup in the event that our troublesome current main ambulance is out of service for any extended period of time. Our thought in the going forward with the article to try to get funding for a new ambulance is that current lag time from order to acquisition for new equipment like the ambulance and with the full ALS equipment is 18 months to 2 years. We're hoping to be able to place an order and we actually are hoping to be able to place an order for a new ambulance that would be less than the amount we're asking for. There's been some price changes in the market, but as your auditor commented earlier, everything's kind of guesswork. In any case, we would like to have the funding available in fiscal 23 to place an order, but it is very unlikely that we would be able to take delivery on a vehicle into early fiscal 25. But we need to have the funding guaranteed for that. I don't know what they'll ask by way of down payment or good faith money. But our thinking was part of what we presented is that we're going to try to get at least one, maybe hopefully 2 more years out of the current ambulance, having the spare ambulance arrangement with Sandwich to back us up in the event that the main ambulance encounters another series of difficult problems like we had over the past 2 years, and that we would not be necessarily expending the money that we're going to be asking for in this article for, as I said, 18 months on the optimistic side to more likely close to 2 years, which would mean probably early fiscal 25. Is that responsive to your question?
It is, Ray. Thanks. That's very helpful.
It kind of
How confident are you about that number?
The amount we're asking for?
Yes.
Because we're looking at some price changes in the market, I think that we have a good deal of confidence we can get what we want for probably a little less than that. But given the instability with interest rates, we left it at that. That would have been what we would have projected, well, when we did the capital planning, figuring on 3% a year inflation from when the last ambulance was bought. That was the number it would take for replacement value. But there have actually been, because we would be going to a gas-powered system and a different frame structure, most of the new ambulances are being built on big Ford 350 or 450 frames with much more efficient gasoline engines. And consequently, the cost is actually lower than what we would have projected. But as I said, with the instability about interest rates, we figured we'd leave it where we had conservatively estimated it originally. And if we need it and we get it for substantially less, everybody will be smiling.
Well, that kind of negates my strategy. I can't borrow money and sit on it for 18 months.
So what would be the outcome then, Ray? What would the funding structure be like? Because you couldn't obviously borrow the money and not spend it within outside of the fiscal year in which you borrowed it and make the books work. So we'd have to pay or appropriate or free cash or however it goes and not borrow it by definition based on that.
Yeah, you want to provide, I mean, they don't need money to order, they just need the authority to spend. So you could say it's funded by free cash, and that means I'll set aside the free cash for that. And it doesn't make sense to then borrow just for the service truck for $65,000, paying $3,000 to get a van doesn't make sense. So I suspect that we'll just reverse my strategy, and we'll just have to face what we have to pay next year when we borrow.
Ray, I think the answer to this question is obvious, but does the fire department need this warrant to pass to, as Rick kind of lays it out, set out on the process of getting this new ambulance? I assume at some point you could, back out of an order without financial impact, but that may be a little risky. What's the answer to that question?
They need a article to place an order.
Yeah.
Okay.
They need the authorization to enter into a contract to purchase. So we'll have to give them that article. Make it funded by free cash. We don't have to change that part of the warrant, but we have to then obviously change Article 21, since we won't be putting that money into stabilization. So that article in the warrant would have to change, but the other articles, and Charlie, I don't know if you've had a chance to read those. If I wordsmith that correctly, that gives us the flexibility on funding either free cash or borrowing. Charlie, are you there? Did we lose Charlie?
I'm there.
21.
Oh, there you are. Did the wording appear to meet the requirement for alternate funding, particularly in the article on purchase of the fire engine and the service truck? I'll get you those numbers if you want to read them.
So you raise and appropriate or transfer and appropriate?
Yeah,
And/or
from
borrow.
available funds.
Right,
I don't mention free cash. I say available funds.
right.
Or borrow, it says.
Or borrow would be the third one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have borrow in there.
Yeah, you do for the water truck. And
Yeah, I think I have it in there for the, so I mean, we can leave it, you can leave the warrant in, you don't have to borrow. because it gives you alternatives. So you can leave that part of the warrant the same, but Article 21 would have to, I mean, in that case, you really don't have to change that either, because the actual budget that you present at the meeting can be less than the warrant. It just can't be more. But I think it would be, for the sake of communication with our taxpayers, we should change that, that Article 21 to 35,000 rather than,
Or 35.
rather than the 435.
So are you all set, Ray?
Yeah, that was I'm sorry. I meant to ask, any of those changes that were made to the budget, did anybody have any questions on those? The most significant one was the employee benefits, where I updated it for what we anticipate the enrollments to be. And the other change was in the water department, where we made the article for the new software system include money for adding history, which will help the water department evaluate billing as it goes out. And also the cost of the existing Bravo system in the article, which eventually will be replaced. The
Correct.
operating expense in the water department then for the computer line is stated as if it would be in future years, 16.3, for all the systems, security networks, the multi-link system, and the rental of the copier. And then the rest of them were really small corrections as we went through the budget.
And the lockbox is a separate item.
The lockbox is it's a separate item, but I included in there the cost for replacing my computer, which is needed. So it's a computer and the, wait a minute, I'm sorry, I misspoke. The lockbox system is standalone. The cybersecurity and my computer are in one article.
Okay.
Hey, Ray, can you just, for my benefit, what are the criteria for an expenditure necessitating a separate article as opposed to being folded into one of the entity's budgets? I'm like looking, for example, at Article 5, 6, 7.
Well, you use articles really to isolate one-time expenditures is the easiest way to view it. Generally, they're capital type expenditures, but in many cases, they're large expense type expenditures. For example, the software project, we can go through the ones in the water department, which are the multiple. Or we could start with what I've got in Prudential. I've got a lockbox system that's standalone. The ongoing cost of the lockbox system is $2,000. Could I put the money up, the startup money in the budget? Yeah, but it's probably more communicative to put it in a one-of article below. And also it helps account for that, as you usually spend money in special articles in drabs and you're working towards a total budget. So it's an enhancement of financial control. And from my perspective, it's an enhancement of communication with our taxpayers between what is ongoing expenses and what are one-time, i.e. special article expenses.
Okay,
What rules there are about, could you group a bunch of those things together? You could. I don't think there's any rules that I'm aware of against it. I think that best practice in communication would argue to keep them separate.
okay, yeah, I'm not objecting to the practice at all for the reasons you stated. I'm just, to your last comment, wondering if there are specific criteria or whether this is a little bit of an art.
It's more art than rule.
Okay.
So are we ready to go through the warrant?
Are we just gonna go through and vote to recommend them all, or we're gonna do specific Q&A on each of them?
Well, we need to
At least a quick Q&A on each of them.
read them, each one into the
Into the record.
into the minutes. And then we need to discuss the proposed bylaw changes from the bylaw committee, which would require them being added to the warrant.
Mhm.
So.
Shall I read them or shall we take turns?
I'll
We
read
can
them.
take turns if you want, or you want to read them, I don't mind.
Yeah.
Are you gonna make your recommendations too?
Yes. Do you want us to do it at each on each article, or can
Or you
we
could wait to the end and do, if you want them all.
recommend all of them
Yeah.
at the end? Okay. So Article 2, to see if the district will vote to set the annual salaries of elected officials as follows. Prudential committee members, members of the Board of Fire Commissioners, and members of the Board of Water Commissioners, $1,250 each, and moderator $250. Article 3, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer and appropriate the sum of $45,000 to establish the reserve fund as provided under Section 5C, Chapter 40 of the general laws. Article 4, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and/or transfer and appropriate $109,568,000 for the labor and salaries for the district's finance department and $270,388 for the remaining expenses of the Prudential Committee to be apportioned approximately as following. Operating expenses, $269,388, miscellaneous $1,000, for a total appropriation of $379,956.
Let me interrupt there with a question that applies to Article 4, Article 8, and well, basically the Prudential, the fire, and the water. We discussed at our last meeting that these numbers don't include the pension and insurance. Is that a matter of custom and practice? Is that that those numbers be in a separate article? Why do we do it that way?
They were,
What?
when Mrs. Murray left and we had a new treasurer, instead of charging the healthcare costs, the pension costs to each department, it was decided to consolidate those costs and put them under the finance department as, one total cost. And also that goes along with a workman's comp. At that time, the workman's comp was in the water department budget, but that was workman's comp for the all of the fire district employees was coming out of the water department budget. So now those benefits are all listed under the financial department. That just seemed like a cleaner way to do it.
Well, it certainly sounds like makes more sense than putting all workers' comp on water department.
Yeah,
Is there any reason that necessitates that, or is this just the custom and practice? I ask because to my mind, it would make more sense to in one article allocate all the costs for Prudential Fire and Water. And that is, we would just have Ray attribute those costs to the appropriate entity, just for the sake of transparency. Obviously, there's an article that lumps all three of them together, but I did want to raise that question here to see if anyone had any thoughts.
Well, if you want to start allocating, you would allocate debt, allocate the finance department. I mean, basically, the district exists, if you go back to the charter, for water, fire, and library. Those are the three things that are mentioned in our charter. So we could take all the costs and boil them back to that. Usually allocations, speaking as an accountant, are satisfying for accountants. They don't do anything in terms of managerial control. I prepared a allocation of the benefits on that budget page, which shows the allocation to the departments. So you can identify what cost in the budget for benefits is identifiable with the fire department and with the water department. I think that is just, if you're going to do allocations, that's a first step. It's not a complete allocation of the costs that the district incurs to support its fire and water activities.
Okay, can you just do me a favor, Ray, and point out where in the budget that is, just for my own edification?
I'm not sure that came through in the, hang on. That came through in the PDF form. It may have been blanked out when I did the PDF because I don't see it. I have it on my Excel, and it's 68% of the benefit is for the fire department, 16% for the water department, 1% for the district, and 15% for retirees. And I have the dollar amounts listed. Certainly that didn't come through on the PDF, and I can revise that so the PDF, so in fact it does come through.
That'd be great, Ray. If you could do that, that'll make me happy. And hearing no one else jumping on this issue, that's a good start. So if you can send out that information, we'll go from there. Thanks.
Okay, I will do that.
Did I complete 4? Article
Yes.
4? Okay.
Yes.
Article 5, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and/or transfer and appropriate from available funds and/or borrow and appropriate the sum of $5,000 for the establishment of a lockbox system for the collection of district funds. Article 6, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and/or transfer and appropriate from available funds and/or borrow and appropriate the sum of $7,400 for the computer upgrades and conducting an independent cybersecurity review of the district operations. Article 7, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and/or transfer and appropriate from available funds and/or borrow and appropriate the sum of $17,000 for digitation and or shredding of district paper records in accordance with the state record retention regulations. Article 8, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer and appropriate $1,899,283,000 for labor and salaries of the district's fire department, $359,446 for the remaining expenses of the fire department to be apportioned approximately as follows: maintenance, $79,720, operating expenses, $278,726, miscellaneous $1,000, for a total appropriation of $2,258,729 by request of the Board of the Fire Commissioners. Article 9, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer and appropriate from available funds and or borrow and appropriate the sum of $345,000 for a replacement ambulance. Article 10, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer and appropriate from available funds or borrow and appropriate the sum of $5,000 for the acquisition and or development of fire department operating systems, the request of the Board of Fire Commissioners. Okay,
I have a question about that one, Fran.
yes.
Just what is it? That's my question, I guess. What does that refer to exactly?
We,
I believe, go ahead, Ray.
we met with the new chief, who wanted to look at the Vadar purchasing system to acquire that. We sat through a presentation on that, and it was determined by Lisa, the chief, and myself, that it was far too complicated, far too cumbersome for what he intended. He does need some sort of system support to delegate and control purchasing authority within the department. For example, the people who would buy ambulance supplies need to work on the budget, and he has to be able to control that process. After we met again with the chief, talked about what are the alternatives that might work, and we determined that number one, we could not come up with a viable system with a firm quote in the number of weeks remaining before the budget, the warrant was set. Number two, we knew that the chief wanted to have that facility when he started compiling the F-24 budget and to control expenditures in 23. So we agreed that we would provide a sum of money if the fire board was agreeable to identify and acquire or develop a system for the chief to control the purchasing of supplies within the fire department. Does that answer your question, Seth?
Yeah, it does. But is that warrant not kind of vague is my question in the wording? And will it be something that, we'll have a lot of flack over? And is it necessary? I mean, is it too vague for the purpose?
Maybe we can work on the wording.
I mean, if it could be, if there's some, I mean, because that was my thought when I read it. I was like, oh yeah, acquisition system, sure, but what on earth does that mean? And or development of fire department operating systems. I just think for the purposes of the district meeting and the public, that if it could be made more clear or concise what it is that the money is going to do. I know it's not a lot of money, but just for the
Can it just say purchasing management
Yes, that would be a very good.
software?
something like that, something tangible as opposed to just from a, wording standpoint. That's my only thought.
I agree, Seth. It's a little vague, and the fire department may want to suggest some language to Ray here to make it clearer, but I agree with you.
Well, I can work quickly with Rick on that.
Seth,
Yes,
yes, do you want to start reading at Article 11 for me?
yes, I will for sure. Do you want to bring it down, or I can read it off of my own printout, but let's see. Article 11, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer and appropriate $31,000 for the water department for service connections, $410,774 for labor and salaries of the water department, and $346,885 for the remaining expenses of the water department, to be apportioned approximately as follows: $97,000 for maintenance, $248,385 for operations, and $1,500 for miscellaneous expenses, for a total appropriation of $788,659 by the request of the Board of Water Commissioners. Any commentary on that one?
No,
Oh, my video is still not working. I'm sorry. I hate to read without my face present. Anyway, Article 12. To see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer and appropriate from available funds and or borrow and appropriate the sum of $16,500 for a new billing and customer service software by the request of the Board of Water Commissioners. Any commentary on that one?
No,
Nope. Okay. Article 13. To see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer and appropriate from available funds and or borrow and appropriate the sum of $20,000 for testing of well sites and related consultation by the request of the Board of Water Commissioners.
so
I'll just-
Ray, this is what we're calling a one-time expenditure. This is something unusual.
Which one are, I'm sorry, I was trying to,
Article 13.
13? As far as I'm aware, it was in their capital plan indicating that it was not an ongoing.
Understood. Okay, thanks. That for me.
But I see I agree, it's pretty,
Because was it relative to the testing of new and emerging contaminants? Isn't that was that what they were talking about when it came into their capital plan?
I think they were talking about magnesium and iron.
Uh-huh.
Isn't that something that's going to need to be done on a regular basis?
I would think. In fact, if we look at the capital plan, I think they have it. No, they just have it as a one-time item.
So it's just, is it a continuing process of testing? I mean,
Well,
Or
they
just-
they routinely test for bacteria. I believe they've done a couple of PFAS studies, testings. I do know that the magnesium and iron are a concern.
Yeah. And I assume a continuing concern.
Well, I don't believe it's something they've been routinely testing for, as far as I know.
I remember them talking about, it was in, where is it, in Presidential Pines, as you say, that where they
Yeah,
were having increase from that particular well. I just, as it pertains to this article, doesn't that seem, I mean, they're operating budget wise, as opposed to a specific.
Well,
I think they can explain that when they, they will be able to give a rationale for it at the meeting
Right.
after they present.
I'm a little leery of recommending it without knowing the answer to that question. I assume no one from the water department is on this call.
No. Rick Posano? You're muted.
Yeah,
Did you want to talk?
no, you just called my name.
Oh, it was because the hand raise thing is still on.
Oh,
You need to
Oh, I
unraise your
have to
hand.
Shut it off.
oh. Okay, I'll ignore your hand.
Thank you very much.
I'm just gonna play devil's advocate. This is based on no knowledge whatsoever. But it could be that that type of testing requires some, if you will, initial investment and setup to put it in place for ongoing testing,
Well, that seems reasonable if they have to buy
if that's true.
kits or, I know, I remember we talked about it, but I didn't remember it being relative to, it seemed like an operational thing. And I thought that the increased testing was going to be relative to the emerging contaminants as opposed to, I mean, obviously iron and manganese. I was thinking more like PFAS than that.
This is kind of the same problem that Article 10 have, which is it's a
Somewhat
little,
vague.
and we're freelancing on what it might mean as opposed to what it does mean. Is Ray, can we deputize you to talk to someone from the water department to ascertain if this is a one-time expenditure, and if it is, change the language a little bit so that that's clear, because clearly, routine testing has got to be part of their regular budget,
Okay,
even if it's once a year or once every 2 years, I would think.
what's the timeline, Charlie? How many days do we have?
Today is 30 days before the annual meeting.
So today's it, right then? Is that,
I think for changing the language. Charlie? Charlie, can you hear me?
Yes,
Can we,
you are required to close the warrant tonight. So the funds that you have here will probably stay here. They can't go up.
right,
So it's, you can still change the wording after you close the warrant.
okay. So this can be clarified by the water department?
Yes,
So when we go to the script, we'll have a better definition or explanation. If the
that
water,
sounds reasonable to me.
assuming the water department ponies up.
Okay,
Shall I go on then?
yes, please.
Article 14, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer and appropriate from available funds and or borrow and appropriate the sum of $75,000 for replacement service truck and the disposal by sale or trade-in of the truck to be replaced by request of the Board of Water Commissioners. Article 15, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer and appropriate from available funds and or borrow and appropriate the sum of $65,000 for electrical upgrades at pump stations by the request of the Board of Water Commissioners. Article
Is this,
sorry.
again, a one-time expenditure?
Yes,
This was,
Okay.
I remember Chris talking about this particular one. It had to do with the antiquated nature of the electrical service in the pump
Great.
houses. You needed new boxes and all that jazz.
Okay, good, thanks.
Article 16, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer and appropriate $5,580 for the labor and salaries for district building maintenance and $20,950 for the remaining expenses of the Prudential Committee to be apportioned approximately as follows. Maintenance, $13,100. Operating expenses, $7,750, and miscellaneous $100, for a total appropriation of $26,530. Article 17, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer and appropriate from available funds the sum of $7,400 to maintain the streetlights of the district. Article 18, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer and appropriate from available funds the sum of $25,000 to support the maintenance of the Katuitt Library. Article 19, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer and appropriate from available funds and or borrow and appropriate the sum of $387,160 for the payment of principal and interest. Article 20, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer and appropriate from available funds and or borrow and appropriate the sum of $886,066 for the purpose of paying employee / other post-employment benefits. Article 21, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer and appropriate from available funds the sum of $435,000 for the stabilization fund as provided under Section 5B, Chapter 40 of the general laws. Now that one is, are we going to stick with this as a warrant?
I think we probably ought to make that 35,000.
35, that's what we were going to do. So
Yeah.
I'll read it again. So we can just amend it in the reading of it, right? So Article 21 amended, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer and appropriate from available funds the sum of $35,000 for the stabilization fund as provided under Section 5B, Chapter 40 of the general laws. Article 22, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer and appropriate from available funds the sum of $45,960 for the water department stabilization fund as provided under Section 9, Section 9, Section 5 of the district bylaws. Article 23, to see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer and appropriate from available funds the sum of $28,000 for an environmental study of the property known as the Katuitt Elementary School at 140 Old Oyster Road in Katuitt.
I have a comment about this.
Go ahead.
I contacted Mark Boudreau, and he said that we can use from last year, part of that $45,000 for the
maintenance of the, or the upkeep of the
maintenance of the
school.
school for the environmental study.
And now this was the environmental study that we talked about relative to the oil tanks and the asbestos and that.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, this will, pardon me, this will cover the asbestos, not the oil tank. The oil tank issue is still in negotiation, and I shouldn't say anything more than that unless we go into.
Because was it not at that meeting that we kind of talked about, or maybe it was me who was commented about spending the money prior to acquiring the building, and was it necessary?
Well, and I think the answer was, if we were to find out that the asbestos was significantly more dangerous and therefore more expensive than we have been led to believe, and by led to believe, I'm referring to the Habib study, which contains a number for asbestos remediation. That it would be wise to find that out before we went through with the deal to assume the property. I don't know that I would be in favor of cannibalizing the $40,000 figure to pay for this. I frankly, off the top of my head, can't remember everything that $40,000 number was meant to include.
It was for electricity insurance. I think, Ray, isn't there an environmental study in there, in that?
Phase 1 ESA, but it's only for $3,000.
Okay,
It was mainly for just to operate it as a bulk for the year that it would take for us to determine what we were going to do with it, right? Is that not?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's-
And then frankly, we concluded that not taking possession, but taking control over it to some extent, that is by heating it or was probably not in our best interests. That is, until the deal is done, it is the town's asset to manage, with all the attendant, liability issues, et cetera. So we, as you know, the town did not heat the school over the winter, but that was their decision.
Right.
I would advocate that we keep the language of Article 23 as written in the happy event that we don't need this money. It can obviously be returned, but that $28,000 number, I'm not exactly sure where it came from, but it is a kind of a rough estimate of what it might it might cost to undertake that assessment.
Mhm.
That's exactly right, Mark. It was a rough estimate.
Okay. I'd like to keep that then.
Okay. Article 24.
And see if the district will vote to close Article 2015-19, the Water Department Security System, which has no unpaid liabilities, and transfer the remaining funds to fund the following articles. Article 2023-12, Water Department Software, $16,500. Article 2023-13, well site testing, $18,030. Now, what's that one? So is that to appropriate money to pay for the one that we just talked about in terms of testing, or is this an additional testing that was in their budget?
But there's not enough money in the article to completely fund it. So you can only fund 80,000, 15,000, and you have to make up the balance with free cash.
I see.
Okay, so when we're asking people to vote on that $20,000 for well site testing, this really indicates that it's going to be $38,030.
18,000, no, it's gonna be $20,000, $18,030, of which is funded by a closed article, the balance of which $11,000, excuse me, $1,970 is provided by free cash.
I'm sorry, Ray, can you say that again? What's the total cost of the well site testing, I guess is the question I want the answer to.
$20,000.
And all but just about $2,000 of it is going to come from the remaining funds in this article.
Correct.
Okay. Seems like an awkward way of. Okay.
The alternative would be just to list the 16,500. All the remaining funds are returned to the general fund and use more free cash to cover it, not mention it. If that would be clear, we could do that.
Yeah, I think that would be better. To return that money to free cash or the general fund.
The general fund. So the remaining funds transfer remaining funds to fund the following article with any other remaining funds returned to the general fund. Does that sound correct, Charlie?
What I was thinking, aren't you gonna do the transfer in Article 13 or 12, whatever one you want you're doing it in, already? before you come down here?
Well, in Article 12, you authorize the spending from various sources. Article 24 creates one of those.
But you've already gonna transfer it in on that article. Is what I'm thinking. You're gonna, your motion's gonna have that 16.5 or 18.3 or 20, whatever we do in the motion.
So,
Should we move this article ahead of those other articles?
That would be my take on it. And then you would have funding already beginning in those articles.
so
It
you-
would reduce the amount of free cash you need.
Yeah. So I would just move this to,
do I even have to mention those articles? Just to create available funds? Close these articles, close this article, and have the funds available for other use?
Yeah, I don't think you have to, because what if you voted to transfer the funds and then you voted against this article?
yeah, you wouldn't have any funds.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Well, no, if you voted against the article, I just use free cash. The
Right.
work doesn't allow me to do it, but I think it would be cleaner to move this article and just say that you're going to close it and transfer the remaining funds to the return to the general fund as available funds.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, if you close the article, the funds would have to go to the general fund.
yeah,
So I don't even, just close the article. Correct?
Yeah, that's what I would say.
All right. So actually, then it would read, we'll vote to close this article, which has no unpaid liabilities, period. So they just close it.
Yes. And then whatever remains would go by statute into the general fund.
Are those funds then immediately available? If it's a warrant-
They won't be, no,
so they're
because
not- they're not available until 24. So
right.
I have to use free cash to cover. That's what I was trying to,
Well, what you're doing is above, you're reducing the amounts that would go to the general fund because you're going to transfer, say, 16.5 into Article 12.
yep,
And I'm not, I don't have Article 12 in front of me, but say it was 16.5, I mean, instead of, you said from available funds, it's from Article 12, what is it?
yeah, it says from available funds.
Right, but when you make your motion, you're gonna tell where those available funds are from.
Well, bear with me.
so the available funds would be from Article 2015-19.
Yeah,
Do we have to do that now, or can we do that in the script?
you do that in the script.
Okay, so,
You don't change, you don't have to change what's there, because when you go to the script, the motion that you make, you're gonna transfer the fund from wherever whatever article it was out of. It could be Article 13 of 2019. I'm not sure which article it is.
It's Article 2012, 2023-12. So if we made this article, article number 3, to close this, we've made those funds available. Or are you saying, wait a minute, let me back up. You're saying that we can leave Article 24 the way it is as revised, just saying we're closing this article.
Yes, because we've already taken funds from this, from the software, for the software from that 2012 article.
So in short, if you just make this Article 11, then that would settle it in terms of the order of things.
I'm not sure
Because-
it's the order that Charlie's talking about. So in the warrant, now not the script, but in the warrant,
In the warrant, you've said you're gonna take it, transfer, one of the ways of doing it is to transfer from available funds. Those available funds are gonna come from that 2012 article for security, water department security.
so taking.
And therefore, you're reducing the amount that's available. The 16.5 is no longer there because you've transferred it to pay for the new billing and customer service software.
Charlie, with this work, taking Seth's point, if we made this Article 24, if we position that in the warrant before Article 12, and just said it's going to close, just have it read to see if the district will vote to close Article 2015-19, Water Department Security System, which has no unpaid liabilities, period. That just closes it out.
Yes,
Okay, so the warrant, all the warrant needs to say that. And if we position that, say after Article 3 or after Article 3, we're okay.
Didn't you just say that if we just send this money back to the general fund, it's not going to be available till 24?
right.
But if we earmark it in the warrant prior to the warrant that spends it,
Yep.
If you
Wouldn't that be-
spend it before it gets to the general fund, then there's no money to go to the general fund.
right?
is
I'm
what
no
trying to say.
parliamentarian, but it seems like if you took this article as it is and then took it up there ahead of the other one, that because you would have enumerated that we're closing this article and then we plan to appropriate the money in the following ways, then we go down and say, okay, now we're going to
Yeah,
pass Article 23-12. And then, yes, okay, so we accept that you're transferring the money there. And then Article 23-13, okay, then that money is going there. And then rather than have it go to get certified or whatever, and then it would be more clear in terms of people would see as they're going through that it would be paid for. You know what I mean? That it would make sense because they're together. And if legally speaking, it would be ahead of it, if that makes a difference for the sake of clarity.
yeah, that's what I would vote to do, is put it ahead of those, ahead of Article 11 and of 12 and 13.
Where do we want to put it?
I'd make it Article 12, and then everything else below it gets renumbered.
Article 12, okay.
24 goes to 12.
And it reads simply to see if no, can't read that way.
No, it reads exactly the way it's written.
Because we close it and then we appropriate it immediately. I don't know if is that a legal thing that we can do, but it seems likely because we were going to do it here.
I don't think you can do that because you haven't, you're transferring it to an unapproved article.
That's true, I guess, isn't it? But failing those, if failing the passage of those articles, it would then just go to free cash anyway. Would it?
No,
And then have to be,
that's the following year.
right, well, yeah, but I mean, it would have to go to be certified, so it would end up in no man's land for a year.
Yep.
So, well, can't you just add to that, that we're transferring, it's going to be available to pay for the water department's software if voted by the district?
Well,
Or
no,
you could,
you make it Article 13. You pass the water department software, authorize that. The next article would then say, and by the way, we're closing this article to fund the one you just said, you just approved. So you would move it to Article 13.
or if that's not appropriate, you could always remake Articles 12 and 13. You could close the warrant, that warrant in 11, say, and then have Article 12 say, vote to appropriate funds from closed article so-and-so to 16,500, and then 13 say to appropriate from closed article so-and-so the amount of 20,000. But is that unnecessarily complex?
You can't, there's only 34,500.
Right, because then we're gonna fund the balance from other places.
So you can only, the cleanest way is just to Mark's point about the confusion of having two different numbers about an article. All we can do is, in my mind, pass the article for the software. Then the next warrant article would be to transfer, to close the security and transfer a portion of those funds to fund the software one that we just passed. So in my mind, you make Article 24, Article 13. And it reads to cover just the 16,500.
Hi, I wanted to see if I go over two chicken banh mi's for pickup.
I'm sorry?
Can I ask a question? When you pass Article 12, where are you going to specify the funds coming from? When you pass Article 12,
Free cash.
free cash. So it doesn't have to come from free cash. It's not going to come from,
Oh, wait a minute.
It's gonna come from available funds.
It was going to come from available funds, which I thought was going to be this closed article.
Right. Yeah, it's like any sunset article that you transfer the money out before it gets to the general fund. So, you instead of raise and appropriate and borrow and appropriate, you're going to transfer from Article 2015, article whatever it was from 2015, the sum of 16,500 for a new billing and customer service software.
what happens if the article is defeated?
If the article is defeated, then
Then
you have 16,500 that you could use in another place.
Yeah, but we want to
And
solve it, and we're committed to that. I don't want to put that at risk. So I would rather get a clean motion on the water department software system, get that passed, and worry about funding in another article, which I'm saying is going to be 13. So once you passed, you've authorized us to spend the money for the system and fund it from available funds. The next article says the available funds are going to be from the closed article. So you make it 13.
yeah,
You pass the software as it's worded. The next article says says everything that 24 said originally, but it just eliminates the well testing and says, and any remaining funds returned to the general fund.
That sounds good.
Yeah,
It'll be
Okay.
cleaner, as you say.
Yep. I have some wording on Article 5, I believe it is, or no, it's not. Article 10,
Uh-huh.
the one that was rather ambiguous. I suggest it reads as follows. To see if the district will vote to raise an appropriate and or transfer an appropriate from available funds and or borrow an appropriate the sum of $5,000 for the acquisition of a purchasing control system for the fire department.
Sounds good to me.
I'm okay with that.
that's fine.
Sounds good.
So everything stands except I have to move 24 in an abbreviated form to Article 13 and renumber all the rest.
Great. Okay, so are we all set on that?
I think so.
Okay. So the bylaw committee has some proposed changes to the bylaws. The first change is for section 1. The officers of the Katuitt Fire District shall consist of a moderator, a prudential committee of 3 members, a 3-member board of water commissioners, a 3-member board of fire commissioners, a clerk, and a treasurer. And the suggested change is that it says an appointed treasurer and appointed clerk. My one concern about that is down in section 3. It specifically says the clerk and treasurer shall be appointed by the Prudential Committee in accordance with provisions of Chapter 328 of the Acts of 1926 as amended. So I'm not sure that we need to do that.
Well, Fran, this change is tied up with the one directly beneath it. We don't want to in any way change how the treasurer and the clerk are appointed. Someone pointed out that Article 1, Section 2 talks about the election of all of officers. And Article 1, Section 1 talks about the treasurer and the clerk being officers. And of course, they're not elected. So the only thing we were trying to accomplish was to, indicate in the first section that the treasurer and the clerk are appointed. And then in the second section, by adding the word elected before officers, we're making it clear that the treasurer and the clerk aren't elected.
I think the treasurer's position is an officer by law.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's why we want it to continue to be identified as an officer.
I have a question. Should that include an assistant treasurer?
We talked about that, Ken, and concluded, no, not at this time.
But we have an assistant treasurer, don't we?
Yes.
We do at this point. The consensus was that we don't think that we could necessarily add assistant treasurer simply by adding it to the bylaws, that might well require state action to, in other words, our creation documents don't mention that. So-
Any change requires state action. We have to send these to the Secretary of State, and they have to go to the legislature for any changes that we make. to the wording.
In any event, we did not propose at this point to add assistant treasurer to this language.
Well, all the other positions are statutory positions, right? As opposed to an employed position or a,
Yes,
Yes,
so, but the section 2 states one member of the Prudential Committee, one member of the Board of Water Commissioners, and one member of the Board of Fire Commissioners shall be elected annually. The moderator shall be elected every 3 years. All officers of the district shall serve for 3 years or until their successors are chosen and qualified.
right. It's the all officers of the district language. And because in the paragraph immediately above, we have defined officers to include the treasurer and the clerk.
Well, isn't the treasurer an officer?
The treasurer is an officer, but he is not an elected officer. And likewise with the clerk. So we're trying to distinguish between an elected officer and an officer. That's why these two go together. An appointed treasurer and an appointed clerk, and then in the next section, elected officers.
I think it's just, I think it's just muddying the waters. I don't think it's, personally, I don't think it's unclear, but Seth, what do you think?
I don't really see how, I don't see how changing it would make it any worse. I think that sounds fine to me if we were to have just to insert elected before officers in order to differentiate between those people who are elected and those people who are appointed from a legal perspective, just to look at it that way, meaning clarity.
That was our thought. We thought this made the committee thought that this made it more clear. An appointed treasurer and an appointed clerk in section 1 and elected before officers in section 2. If Seth, if you're okay with it.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I don't take issue with it particularly.
Okay. Do I need to propose specific language for Ray or?
No, it's for Charlie.
For Charlie, or is the language in my email satisfactory?
Well, it has to, the warrant's going to have to show how it's currently written and what the proposed change is. Correct, Charlie?
Yes,
Yes. Okay.
Okay, you want me to type that up for you, Charlie?
if you want to, or I can do it.
I'm happy to let you do it.
Okay,
Okay.
So that presumably is one article. The next proposed article relates to the annual report of the district. We had extensive discussions about when the annual report should be filed, which extensive discussions. We eventually concluded that we should leave it the way it was, but there was a consensus that the annual report was nowhere defined and that it would be beneficial to lay out what was expected. Therefore, we came up with this language based on a review of prior year's annual reports.
So this is just enumerating the constituent parts of the annual report in the bylaws so that it'll maintain the same form regardless. 100 years from now, no one remembers what was in it.
Correct.
I just think this is micromanaging. I don't think, the bylaws are, this is what the bylaws are specifically for. I think the bylaws are to, that you need to have an annual report. I'm not sure that what the contents of the report are necessary. Charlie,
Well, I'm sorry. Go on.
Charlie, does Barnstable have this requirement in there for their bylaws?
No,
No. Does it mention the annual report in their bylaws?
it does mention the annual report, yes,
Oh, okay, all right.
that there will be one.
So I mean, theoretically, if we wanted to just have an annual report that said there was a fire department and there was a water department, we could just put whatever we like in the annual report. Is it just by traditions or for, based on tradition that we include what we do in the annual report?
No, what section 2 says is the clerk shall cause to be published all annual reports of all officers and committees of the district by the end of the calendar year.
So it's essentially this, I mean, but not enumerated so clearly.
Right.
Yeah,
And then if
exactly.
you look in section 11, subsection 7 there, Article 11, section 7, it says that all offices shall have their narratives within 45 days of close of the year.
Yeah, Charlie, we did note that there was some ambiguity between, that's one of the reasons we wanted to define what the annual report was. Because there's some language that says within 90 days, you need to have of the close of the fiscal year, you need to have all the data relating to wages, salaries, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not the annual report per se. And then there is also reference to narrative reports. Again, not entirely clear what that means. That's why we thought that it'd be worthwhile to every time annual report appears in the bylaws, to capitalize it and to set forth what that means. Because right now it's kind of, yeah, everyone sort of knows because we've been doing it this way, but it's not spelled out.
I mean, what's there is what's in the report. So,
Meaning what's the proposed
What-
language here is what's in the report.
yes.
Okay. All right, any motions or? Seth, I guess this one's up to you too.
I guess. I don't necessarily have any, I mean, I can see what Fran says about micromanaging, but I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea to have things more clearly spelled out or enumerated for people, especially as the years go on and, the boards change and the system, the makeup of things changes as we go forward. Does it hurt to have it exactly enumerated what we expect to be in the annual report? I don't think it really hurts. I'm willing to give it a run and see if people want to pass this and have it be in the bylaws. I'm fine with that.
All right. And then the last one here is Article 11, Section 11. Basically what this is the advisory committees. And the language says that you can put together an ad hoc advisory committee consisting of citizens of the district. There was some thought that it should be narrowed to make it voters of the district. Someone pointed out that in fact, we've had ad hoc committees, for example, with the search for the new fire chief that included former fire chiefs who were neither citizens nor voters of the district. And the thought among the group was that was a laudable, outreach to people who were experts on the topic, and we should make it such that these are advisory committees, of course, nothing they conclude is binding. But if you can reach out to experts on whatever topic you're interested in, that is worthwhile. And PS, that's what we're doing already. So that's the proposal there.
How does the whole sentence read? That particular Article 11, Section 11. Not that it really matters. I'm just curious how individuals says you may, I could look it
It
up.
reads, the Prudential Committee, the Board of Fire Commissioners, and the Board of Water Commissioners may from time to time appoint a panel of citizens of the district to act as an ad hoc committee to study and advise on subjects of interest in the district, to the district.
Individuals, advisors, you could use a million different words in that spot.
Exactly.
Well, I'm wondering if legally they have to be citizens of the district.
No, because, if you have, the advisors for the, if you hire advisors like the engineers that the water commissioners hire, they aren't citizens of the district.
No, but they could be consultants to the committee. The committee should be citizens, and then they could get whatever consultants they want.
But see, originally, the way what was changed the last time around was that,
Did it used to say voters or?
it had voters in one spot, and then it had citizens in this spot. And I contend the reason it put citizens down here instead of voters was that so that people who weren't, summer people who aren't voters would be eligible to sit on an ad hoc committee. Because obviously they're interested.
Yeah, that was how the conversation began. And then we concluded, if there are people, who have expertise on the topics we're interested in, that they may not be consultants and we don't have to pay them. We'd prefer to get their expertise for free.
Yeah. So they don't have to be members of the committee. They can just advise the committee.
No, they can be on the committee.
Well, that's a question. Do they have to be citizens of the district to be on the committee or not?
Well, that's what we're deciding right now.
Yeah,
Um,
and there's no reason why anybody can't advise the committee whether they're citizens or not. And the committee itself could be citizens or voters, whatever.
Well, if you say voters, then you eliminate the summer people.
Well, they can
Right.
still participate. How do you know, how do you define a citizen of the district? How do you,
Well, none of the actions of the committees or these committees are binding at any rate. And if we've been operating in flagrante delicto of this in any way, because we've had committees with all kinds of people on them.
Yeah, I refer again to the fire chief search, and that, there were people willing to give us their time. Former fire chiefs, and Rick, was emphatic that it was very helpful to have these folks who were neither citizens nor voters, but were members of the search committee.
well,
I mean, at some point, you're kind of, you can't be a member of the committee, but you can give us advice.
Well, a member of the committee can vote and an advisor can't vote. That's how I picture the difference. And they can have all the advisors they want, but the members of the committee, I think, should be voters of the district. I was just,
No,
okay.
No.
I'm fine with using individuals or maybe, that's a fine word. Why not? Advisors, individuals, either of those would be. So I don't oppose
Okay
that.
with that?
so you have to take out, a panel of time to time, appoint a panel of individuals to act as an ad hoc committee.
What is it? It says a panel of,
It says right now, it says appoint a panel of citizens of the district to act as an ad hoc committee.
I think that's what we're taking out, citizens of the district, and replacing it with individuals.
Individuals.
Okay. Sounds like we're on board with that. The only other thing I'll mention, I don't think this needs to go into a warrant. Article 5, Section 1, I think it's just a grammatical error. Says that the Prudential Committee is supposed to ensure the appropriate, expenditure of funds, and we believe that the correct word is ensure, but we don't think that needs a warrant to make that kind of change. Just thought I'd put it in there in case anyone feels differently.
No, it's just a grammatical correction.
Okay. And there are other less substantive, not less substantive, non-substantive spelling, grammatical, and form errors. Lisa Haven was a very good proofreader on some of those, but none of them in any way change the meaning or intent. They just clean up the document. And that's all I've got.
Well, I have one suggestion for a bylaw change. I'd like to see the bylaw, except for Hyannis, we're the only district that review our bylaws every year. And I really think that the last two or 3 years they've been done, have done a very thorough review of the bylaws. And I would like to change it to once every 3 years. The bylaw committee shall meet every third year, or as is necessary for a special change or addition to the bylaws. I just don't think a review of the bylaws on a yearly basis is necessary. Any comment?
I think maybe every other year might be, might fly. And I do like your language about, except as otherwise required. The bylaws committee didn't touch on that, but I don't think that prevents the Prudential Committee from proposing it. Seth, your thoughts?
I mean, I understand the thought based on, dilution through meddling. If you're constantly tinkering with them, eventually you're going to end up with changes that are unnecessary. I mean, there was a long period where there was a little review of the bylaws.
When was that?
I don't know, was there? It seemed as if there was,
No.
maybe there wasn't. It's
No,
been
there wasn't.
continuous and ongoing meddling.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
well, so, I mean, I don't know, I would be fine as long as there's the provision to alter the bylaws if necessary. That if, I wouldn't be against having it be every other year. I mean, at the same time, I don't feel as if any of the changes that have occurred since I've been on this board have been particularly, remarkable or have changed them in a substantive way, really. But I don't know. I'll let you guys pick this one.
Yeah, I will say that the group, we met 4 times. The group we discussed a number of areas that didn't make it into changes. It was worthwhile for me just getting to, we just kept having to reread these bylaws over and over and over again to make sure they were, consistent. That was a useful exercise. It really was. I feel like I'm much more up on the bylaws than when I began this process. And I certainly don't want to diminish the efforts of the people on the committee who were terrific. We spent a lot of time on this. Does it need to be done every year? Maybe not.
There is always the fact that people don't have to approve the changes to the bylaws. I mean, we could go to the meeting with these changes to the bylaws and
Yeah.
theoretically people could say, no, that's fine. We liked
Yeah.
it the way it was. I mean, we kind of take for granted that they'll just accept.
Yeah,
a change.
they might not.
I mean, I personally, I don't see any problem with constantly reviewing them other than that point that, do we get to a point where they get so tinkered with that they are no longer clear? Or is it they're getting more clear as time goes by? Will we hit a point where we no longer need to fool with them unless
Yeah.
there's going to be a major change?
I suggest you
That-
look at something like the COMM bylaws. Those are
I'm sure it's a long and winding
long
document.
and very much overdone, it's like,
Mhm.
I'm not against that appearing for a vote, going for a vote, to amend it not to 3 years, but every other year.
Okay, well, I guess I'll remain silent on this one. It sounds like, other than if we're gonna do it, it should be at least every other year.
And with the specific provision that panel can be convened. I mean, people can change the bylaws of their own accord, essentially, through the petition process.
Yeah,
So, I mean, ultimately, I suppose it depends on the will of the individuals who are comprised of the committee to say, do we want to do it constantly?
I would maintain that we should, it's not a crazy idea, but I would maintain that we should, to do it less frequently. I would maintain that we should continue to do it annually, but I understand where you're coming from. So if you two want to make that proposed change, so be it.
all right, I'll change it to every other year, but, it's not, nobody's reviewing the bylaws of the state of Massachusetts and changing them every year.
Yeah.
They just keep adding to them, I just, so. So believe that brings us to 29 articles on the warrant.
Emailed the revised warrant to each of you, which changed the wording in Article 10 to what I articulated, and moved what used to be Article 24 to be Article 13.
Right.
And the way it now reads is to see if the district will vote to close Article 2015-19, the Water Department Security System, which has no unpaid liabilities, and transfer a portion of the unspent funds to Article 2023-12, Water Department Billing and Customer Service Software. The balance of any unspent funds to be returned to the general fund. And the reason I left that in is because the security article lives in the capital fund. And if we just close it, the funds will stay in the capital fund, and we want to move them to the general fund.
So I will accept a motion to approve the warrant as amended, or approve the warrant articles 1 through 29 for the 2022 Katuitt Fire District Annual Meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay. All right. So,
Charlie, are you gonna publish?
I'm sorry?
I'm going to ask Charlie. He's going to be the one to publish.
Yes. There's nothing on Freedom Hall. Is there anything on the Katuitt School Committee?
There really is not. We were supposed to be meeting with the town on this Wednesday. They're unavailable because of COVID. That meeting's been bumped until the 10th of May, and I suggest we revisit the issue at that point.
Okay.
I have a question. I think at the annual meeting, because there's gonna be a lot of questions about the status. And would you guys like to say something before the annual meeting, just to give an update to the voters?
When you say before the annual meeting, meaning that the day of the annual meeting?
Oh, just before I open the meeting. You know, everyone will be there and we say this pledge of allegiance. And I could ask you to make a brief review.
We would be happy to do that.
That would be great. I think that'd be apropos.
Okay.
Okay. And the Policy Advisory Committee?
We're actually meeting on the 2nd of May, I think. So we didn't meet prior to this meeting. I'll have something.
All right. Okay. And at this point, is there any public comment?
Yes, Carol Zace. Having spent 4 very long committee meetings on the bylaw, I'm very concerned that just in this one meeting, you made another change that was not even considered by your ad hoc. And I think it's important that we continue to have those committees because you never know what they are going to find. And I'm just disappointed that this happened this way.
Well, actually, we are allowed by the bylaws to propose bylaw changes.
I didn't say you weren't allowed. I just said I was disappointed that you didn't come to a bylaws meeting and utilize your ad hoc committee and made a change like this.
Fine. Any other public comment?
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay. I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. See you soon.
Thank you, Lisa.